Um, Hi Avinash, so good to have you. This is apparently, this is the first time that I am doing, and you're one of the first NGOs that we're doing this. So, very, very excited, looking for what is available, how we can explore and work together as an opportunity, what is available for both of us. So, thank you so much for making this time on a Monday evening. For everybody who's going to watch this video, this is Avinash from Rocha, and he's going to talk about his NGO and his journey with us and things like that. So very, very excited to know your work, Avinash. So yeah, I just want to start off with just a small introduction about your work and how all of it started. Yeah, just your journey.
Well, thank you, Ashwini, for considering us as an organization to be featured on your website and your initiative. It's always a pleasure to talk about the work that we do. I'd like to start off my journey with Rocha because prior to this, I was also associated with various conservation initiatives across the country.
Wow.
My association started with Rocha in the year 2006, and I joined Rocha for an activity related to elephant population estimation. And I saw a news feature which wanted some volunteers to assist the organization in helping out with this enumeration exercise. And since then, my journey to understand what conservation is at a formal capacity began, and I think that's how I got to understand the various nuances of what wildlife conservation is all about and what it requires for one to be part of such initiatives, and
Wow.
how organizations like Arusha give you that opportunity to try and explore your passion for wildlife and nature, and also how you could substantially contribute to conservation at the grassroots.
Right.
And that's how my formal association began. And so my first initial days of working with Arusha, of course, not them employed at Arusha, but my initial working days was largely to assist the team in collecting information that is critical to come up with conservation. I think that is something that's very fundamental when you're doing research. And Arusha is notable for its research contributions to the Bannerghatta National Park, which it's been working since 2003.
Okay.
And yeah, so since then I've probably graduated to various capacities in the same organization. I've been working for
Awesome.
quite some time, and so I later went on to do a lot of education and outreach programs for various groups, including people from Bangalore city and from local villages, and also different fractions of society, primarily to impart the needed knowledge about why it is important to conserve natural resources, nature, and wildlife. And
Right.
currently at Arusha, I head the science and conservation initiatives, and that's been one of our major focus in the Bannerghatta landscape. And I mean, just to quickly tell you about the Bannerghatta National Park,
Yeah.
it's a protected forest that's just about 25 kilometers south of Bangalore city. And so our work is largely to do with elephant conservation. And if not many people might be aware that you find wild elephants so close to Bangalore
Definitely.
city. And so our work is to try and come up with conservation research and management solutions for this issue of human-elephant conflict, which is one of the serious threats to the endangered Asian elephant. So we use numerous approaches and skills to try and address this escalating issue, and that's pretty much what Arusha stands for, and it's known for in this landscape. And over the years, we've built extremely useful relationships with the various stakeholders that we work with, being with government agencies, non-governmental organizations, universities, and such. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's very, very interesting. Like you mentioned, I think not many of them are aware that this is also happening in the city of Bangalore. It's more like if it's a social sector or an impactful work, mostly people think about education, shelter homes, or things like that. Beyond that, I think what really interests us to talk to you is one, the person who's doing the research about knowing your NGO is someone who really likes elephant. Second, the minute they saw your work, I'm like, oh, it's national. It's Bannerghatta. We don't stay very far from wherever Bannerghatta is. It's hardly like 16 kilometers or so. But I think it's very important for us to really see what are the other important, impactful work that's around us, and how can we really support each other. Like you said, there are so many other programs within Arocha that you are, already starting to do, and there's so much that you're also wanting to do. Maybe like as we talk, we'll explore that. But thank you for, sharing that in detail. So I think, I mean, I just want to check, because I know you're not the founder, but I'm sure you would know the story of what triggered you to start, or your team to start this organization. Is there a story behind it?
Yeah, there is. I think, like I mentioned earlier, with Arusha, the Indian chapter, just to quickly give you a background about Arusha. Arusha is a unit. I mean, Arusha India is a unit of an international network of 23 organizations, and we're
Mm.
based in around 23 countries.
23
And
countries. Huh? Wow.
yeah, and so the Indian chapter. I mean, so from a regional representation, I think India stands for the Southeast Asian sector, along with our counterpart in Singapore. So we have an office there as well. Um, but the Indian chapter started in 2003, and this was the vision of Dr. Vijayanand, who was a scientist, who was formerly part of a Indian Institute of Science Initiative of Asian Elephant Conservation.
Yeah.
And back in 2003, he fundamentally met um, the founders and people who are responsible in initiating Arusha projects across the globe. And then
Mm-hmm.
he came in contact with this organization back in 2003. And so when he realized that the need for conservation, especially for elephants, was much higher in the Eastern Ghat landscape, which is where the
Mm-hmm.
Bannerghatta Park is based, he believed that it is important to look at conservation of especially elephants in this landscape, because from a protection perspective, elephants in Bannerghatta are seldom considered to be anything of national importance, which is a very sad thing. I should be smiling when I say this, but so it was his vision that he wanted to broadcast a larger conservation model for securing the Bannerghatta landscape. And since then, he came up with various approaches, and research being one of the major approaches in
Wonderful.
deriving empirical information about why it is important to protect elephants, especially for the people of Bangaloreans. Because if a
Wow.
landscape like or a forest like Bannerghatta is actually providing for elephants, and I'm sure it has a lot to provide for the larger populace of Bangalore city, and that's where the vision started.
Wow.
And when I joined in 2006, I kind of resonated with the same vision, because as a Bangalorean, I think it's important for us to have a sense of intrinsicism to protect something that's in our backyard rather than looking at global issues. Of course, I'm not discounting the importance of other issues, but I think it's more intrinsic,
Yeah.
and one must espouse the fact that conservation in the backyard, or looking at something that's much more closer to your heart, is where you can start off with, and that's exactly what I also did. And I am very fortunate to be part of this movement for more than a decade now. And I think I've also been testimony to a lot of change. And ostensibly, I also see that there's a lot more that needs to come forth from people of Bangalore, and also
Mm-hmm.
for the Bannerghatta area as such. Bannerghatta, a lot of people think it's just a zoo and there's nothing to do with the nature and wildlife
Mm-hmm.
as such. But that's sometimes misconstrued, and even in media for that
Right.
matter,
Right.
about captivity and things like that. So
Wow.
that's where I think my journey started, and since then I've been part of this study of elephants
Mm.
for almost 13 years now. It's probably the longest study on elephants anywhere in the Eastern Ghats.
Wow.
And so fundamentally, that's how it all came together. And I've been also been kind of fortunate to build a group of people,
Mm.
and try and create a movement, if I may say, to try and protect the natural resources that is available just so close to Bangalore city.
Wow. I must acknowledge the fact that it's over a decade, and I could really experience your sharing so powerfully. And I think that's the root of everything, right? Like you said, it's not like a very one of 10 causes. It's a very unique cause, I would say. And people, I think it's also the passion comes. I don't know if there's a lot of education or knowledge provided about this. Also, there are a lot of people may not even know about it. I think that's where I feel maybe there's the lack. I'm not really sure about it, but maybe considering that that could be one of this. But I think moving on to next question. if I ask you, what would be one of your one or two learnings or surprises or takeaways as long as your journey has been?
The job is more of a journey based and rather destination kind of
Right,
thing. Because
right.
when I started, someone said conservation take a lot, maybe years of your life, and I was just like, I was thinking that person is mad, but I think it's really true because it takes almost um, maybe half of your lifetime or entire lifetime for you to kind of experience it, and especially when you're being part of um, something like this full time,
Mm,
and
mm,
almost your life and time and work and all of that to one
right.
cause. I think it's more of a journey than a destination. For me, my experiences continue as I speak because I'm still
Mm-hmm.
part of the same movement. But I think in the initial days, I used to, you know, kind of. I think when this whole concept of human-elephant conflict was something that I actually experienced first time, where
Mm-hmm.
absolutely negative interaction between human and animal, and there's a lot of strained relationships between the stakeholders. I was witness to a lot of gettowing by villagers at the
Mm,
forest department, or even at people like us, because they used to identify us as elephant protectors. And although elephant in this country has a very serious cultural and religious
mm-hmm. Right.
symbolism, but there was this absolute angst or against the negative interactions, that negative sense of feeling that they would have for the animal, and that's something that I couldn't understand, because this
Right.
is something that I thought it wouldn't resonate with especially city folk. I mean, a lot
Mm,
of people like elephants, a lot of people
right.
like wildlife. When you go into an agrarian kind of setup, people have a
Mm,
lot of negative apprehensions about the elephant. And I've been personally accosted by a lot of villagers, and I mean, I've had people, you know, you know, throw invectives against me, and that's something that I really couldn't figure. I was sometimes wondering as to why am I doing this in the name of
yeah.
elephant conservation. But then later you decide to look at it from a holistic capacity, and then you realize
Mm,
that when the elephant, and there's a lot of like I mentioned, negative relation. There's a lot of loss of livelihood that happens because elephants tend to come out of the
right.
forest, invade crops, and there's a lot of depredations and directly affects the livelihood of people.
Correct.
I think for me, my journey has been to try and understand this and come up with a comprehensive solution. And when I say
Mm,
solution, I also mean conservation. I think because
wow.
in a landscape like Bannerghatta, both people and elephants are important. You
Mm,
can't look
mm,
at it from a very pro-conservation approach and say only elephants need to be protected, because the lives of people also are at stake.
mm,
So,
mm.
so one, two instances would be these kind of, because I continue to work in villages, and
Got it.
in fact, I shifted
So
based
the
from
villages you mean in and around Karnataka or
in and around Bannerghatta. So there are about 1 million people that live around Bannerghatta National Park,
wow,
and
that's a big
close to
number.
about close to 150 odd villages. I mean, yeah, if you look at the park perimeter, and if you take about 3 kilometers or 1 kilometer from the park perimeter, you have 150 villages, and all of them depend on farming for subsistence. And when an elephant comes and raids their crops, and so this is absolute loss of livelihood. And some in extreme cases, you also have fatalities where there's
Mm,
increased persecution of elephant and people. So I've seen that, and I continue to live in that kind of ecosystem. Arusha's
mm,
office is just abutting the national park, and we live in a village. And so there are several such narratives where you look at the whole situation of what you actually mean by conservation.
mm,
Conservation
mm.
is but I think the fundamental essence of what conservation is about, working at the grassroots and trying to address
Right,
the
right.
problem at the very landscape level. Um, so yeah, so in that way, being part of this long journey in one area gives you that ability to look at change, look at detail, and being able to
Totally connect with
understand
you.
the system through experiences. And yeah, so I think it's an honor. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I don't think so. It could be limited to just one experience,
Right,
because I
right.
have
I
experienced.
understand. But I think one of the questions that I asked you is what is your surprises? Could I think it's surprising that I live in Bangalore, born and raised in Bangalore, and there's so limited information about this whole thing that I know, like very little. Just by talking to you a couple of minutes now, even about the number itself is so big for me, you know. I think it's just so inspiring, I have to say that. One important question, I'm sure, being like it's more than a decade, you because you are with interest and with so much of passion you're doing this, you would definitely know what are the, myths, what are some myths and, stereotypes about or around the cause that you're working for, along your journey, and what is the
I think
reality?
one of the stereotypical narratives about conservation in general, not just where I work, but I think it's a lot of people. I come across a lot of people talking about. I mean, especially in the current times of environmentalism in this country. I mean, the standard stereotypical notion is that conservation is a very dying cause, and I mean, there's nothing more to save, and everything is lost, and I think no point in doing something because it's a more development-based economy, and so a lot of such negative or rather pessimism in terms of why conservation is not really important in today's day and age. I think it's also a global phenomenon. I think we've already lost a lot of what we are supposed to have in terms of biodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
One standard impression is that this is not something that's going to be sustainable, but I totally don't believe in that proposition, largely because of the fact I'm very positive about um, conservation in general, because I think we should also celebrate the successes that we've had. I think this country has an incredible history of course, we've lost a lot, and that's something that we should not worry about. I think we should remember it. But I think fundamentally, we've also done a lot more to secure natural spaces, wild spaces, as well as our wildlife. And that's something that I very strongly advocate in wherever I speak. I think one needs to be very positive. I mean, it's just something to got to do with your wisdom, as I normally say. I think one must always have a positive outlook towards life, and I think conservation is no exception in that way.
So,
So one would be to dispel that myth that it is a lost cause, and I think we should also sometimes pause and celebrate for the good things that have already also happened in the due
mm-hmm.
course. And I think some of the states in Karnataka, I mean some of the states in India, and especially Karnataka has done fairly well in terms of its contribution towards conservation. Therefore, I bring that to the Bannerghatta context. I think in the last 13 odd years, we've seen a lot of positive transformation, especially in the
Wow,
lives of people as well as elephants.
awesome.
So,
I
so
think
yeah.
that people must know these. I think that's very, very important. That's so true. I think that's very, very good. I think this last two questions that I definitely want to ask you is more like a very intentional question. So what is, like, what is a challenge or a question that you want or you'd like to leave the next generation with? Because I totally feel like, at least as an organization, Ripple is focusing on how we can, really, like, I did go through your website and I did see that there are certain, training sessions that you do for younger people. And I think the intention of doing that is to really build awareness and give them that education that's needed and provide them with, enough information that they can generate that kind of an interest or have a passion or even have knowledge about these are things that's available, right? So, for the next generation itself, what is a challenge or a question that you'd like to leave with?
See, I'm not sure I'm that old to like question the next generation, but fundamentally, I think the focus of what we do is to try and develop a conservation culture. What we
Okay.
know from our experience, that we kind of understand this craft really well,
Mm-hmm.
and what we'd like to have left is for the younger generation to experience. And I think because fundamentally what we're doing right now is reversing the negative things that the earlier generations has done. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to leave the next generation with a sense of hope and wisdom to try and transform communities and wildlife spaces for the future generations. I think that
Correct.
it's more of a continuum, if I may look at it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think we need to fundamentally breed the conservation culture in people, because I think protecting nature and natural spaces, it should be an intrinsic value for everyone. Because I've
Correct.
never come to my life experience where I meet different audiences where they do not like forests, they do not like elephants. So we don't need to convince people like that. But there's
Correct.
there's a large tract of society who do not understand the implications of why nature is important, wildlife is important. Because
Right.
I think I know that if we don't have nature around us, none of us exist today. So I think,
So true.
at least for our own selfish reasons, we need to conserve and protect. And I'd like to ask people to support causes such as what we're doing, as well as contribute to larger conservation movement. I think it
Right.
should be something that everyone should partake in and substantially contribute, not by just being just being in armchairs and just talking about it, but in
Mm-hmm.
fundamental in fundamental lines try and be part of initiatives that transform and bring about change. And I think that's
Right.
the wisdom that I'd like to impart in the next generation.
Wow. I think that's so real, and I think it's important, like you said, um, and also ties to the last second question that I'm asking is there a specific ask? Let's say, how can public help you right now? If you look at, is there a thing that you want to say to the public or
I'd
help?
like to say a lot of things, but I limit it to what we need. One is to try and support us to the various initiatives that we do, because conservation costs money; it doesn't come for free. And I think being part of some fundraising campaigns that Arusha India requires is something that you can really help us with directly.
Mm, mm,
Some of our projects have experience of being tested over time and have the tutelage of people who have contributed to global conservation. So therefore, some of our projects really have substantial impacts on the ground. So that way, if Bannerghatta is your calling, and if you're a Bangalorean, then of course Bannerghatta should be a cause that you
right.
need to definitely support. Now, this is something that I directly, openly vouch for.
Mm,
Because
mm,
I do it myself, and my
right.
bit is this. And the other way people can actually fundamentally support is, it goes back to my earlier response, is to be part of such movements, like
Mm, mm,
volunteer your time, volunteer your expertise. Because conservation is a beautiful space where you're not necessarily uh, required to have a certain specific. Of course, I'm a scientist today. Well, I use research to formally educate myself, but conservation requires all kind of expertise, people from
right.
various walks of life. Because even the volunteers that we have right now come from different backgrounds, like IT
Mm,
people, musicians, artists, and architects, and we have different profiles, and all of them, I'm sure, have something or the other to offer to
very true.
contribute
I
to the
think that's true.
creativity. So I think that way you can support us in so many different ways. And if you're a Bangalorean, then you should visit this landscape and at least know about it,
Yeah.
and connect with it. And I'm sure you'll know exactly what to do by yourself, because if you have the calling, then none of us or anything can stop you from doing
So true. I think I think anything comes with a passion. There is no stop to it until there's a biggest constraint. And moreover, when you find what the constraint are, I think we can find a solution to it if there is passion driving the whole thing, right? With all your 13 years of experience, I know there would have been a deeper struggle, there would have been questions and all of that. Because you were still pursuing it and you had your passion, I think you were able to, really stay through the whole journey. And I'm very inspired talking to you, Avinash, I must say this. And I think as part of Ripple, what we are intending to do is really, so like I told you in our calls, is basically one, if you are a smaller NGO, we will look at how we can support you on an immediate level. If you are an NGO, in terms of the years that you have a lot of experience and your causes is something that needs knowledge that needs to go out to the people in terms of communication, in terms of fundraising, in terms of building the whole project and seeing what is the gap, how we can build this together. We're very extremely excited about that, and I have to say that. So I did mention Akshay Cherian as the founder. I will be talking to him, and we will take this forward and see how we can partner, and if there is definitely a possibility of doing some collab work about partnering with what you're doing and seeing how we could build this together. But thank you so much. I think
it.
that's what I am looking at. Yeah,
Yeah, and you're free to invite yourself to come and visit us, and we have a nice
absolutely. I
research.
think my team would be super excited about
Yeah,
this.
you can bring your entire team. We
I
can
will. I will. I'm going to keep you in touch with our team as well. And if there are people who want to really come visit, I definitely want to come and visit. So I'm going to inspire them and invite them to come visit. We're going to come and visit like your place, and then we'll take it forward and see how we can really explore. That's something that's available. Okay. But honestly, I think all that you said is very, it's, I think I'm in a space right now to do a lot more work about the whole conservation and seeing how can I get educated more about this. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time once again. I'm looking forward to see how we can explore and grow together.
Thank you. Such a pleasure
Thank you
talking
so
to you.
much.
Thanks so much for the
Same here,
opportunity.
Avinash. Thank you so much.